Standing before a notoriously haunted house, I opened my phone. A chilling video popped up, blood-covered people screaming for help inside a haunted attraction. Suddenly, a dark figure lunged behind them. The screen cut to black. When I tried to find the video again, it was gone. Who were they? Were they real? I'm a communications student with a growing obsession, uncovering strange, unexplained phenomena that go viral on social media. One night, while aimlessly scrolling through my feed, a video caught my attention. It featured Shadow Hill Haunt, a haunted house attraction infamous for being too realistic. Whispers in the comment sections claimed that some visitors had vanished after entering, never to return. Of course, there was no official report, no solid proof, just fragments of rumors, deleted videos, and eerie coincidences. But something about the clip stayed with me. A group of people covered in blood, screaming for help, and a shadowy figure lunging at them before the footage cut out. When I tried to find the video again, it was gone, like it never existed. That moment felt less like a scare tactic and more like a challenge, a message. So I decided to go alone to see if Shadow Hill was just urban legend or something worse. I stepped into the haunted house alone, my footsteps echoing down the narrow hallway. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest. As I moved deeper, a shiver ran through me. A bloody handprint was smeared across the glass panel beside me. It was in the exact same spot I had seen in the video. My heart pounded. This wasn't part of a set. It felt real. I continued forward, turning into a dimly lit corner of the house. That's when I saw it. A phone lying face down on the floor, its screen faintly glowing. It was still recording a live stream, ongoing. But there was no one around. No guests, no actors. Just silence. I crouched beside it and noticed something else. The scuff marks on the floor, the trail of disturbed dust, the clear signs of a struggle. My skin prickled. Whoever owned the phone had been dragged or pulled, and now they were gone. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But I had already stepped too far into this mystery. And something told me that whatever had happened here, it was far from over. I bent down and picked up the phone. Its screen was still on, displaying Live One Viewer. But that viewer wasn't me. A chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, the words "Viewer has left" appeared, and the screen went black. My hands trembled. I looked around. The hallway behind me, which just moments ago was filled with the soft hum of flickering lights, was now dead silent. The ceiling lights blinked erratically before going out completely. Then, a strange hissing noise echoed from behind the velvet curtain on stage. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I pulled the curtain aside. What I saw drained the blood from my face. It was a room exactly like the one in the video. Blood smeared across the walls, chairs with broken ropes dangling from them, and a camera swinging on a single cord from the ceiling. In the center of it, all stood a massive mirror. And in that mirror, I saw myself. But not just myself. Behind me, in the reflection, a shadowy figure was creeping closer. Closer with each heartbeat. But when I spun around, the space behind me was empty. Still, in the mirror, the figure kept advancing. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a coincidence or a prank. I was now inside the very video I had seen. The setup, the screams, the fear, it was all part of something bigger. I wasn't watching anymore. I was being watched. I wasn't investigating the horror. I had become the next subject of it. Suddenly, from behind the mirror, a sound echoed, a dragging footstep, slow and deliberate. A figure emerged, tall, cloaked in black, his face smeared with blood. He matched the shadow from the video I'd seen before. My blood ran cold. Without thinking, I turned and ran. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, each step heavier than the last. I reached for my phone to call for help, but it was gone. My pockets were empty. Panic set in. He wasn't running, but he was always behind me, relentless, like he already knew the outcome. I threw myself into the control room. Dozens of security monitors lit up before me. I saw myself from every angle being followed, stalked. But then my eyes landed on another screen. It showed recordings of past victims. The same bloody faces I had seen in the first video. Screaming, crying, begging. They had been real. They had been here. It was a trap. I scanned the room and spotted a drawer labeled Archive. Inside, I found memory card. I grabbed as many as I could, trembling. Just as I turned around, the man burst through the door. I didn't hesitate. Adrenaline kicked in. I darted through the emergency exit and back into the endless maze of the haunted house. He followed, his breath steady, his steps like echoes from hell. I clutched the memory cards tightly. They held the truth, proof of what had been done here. If I made it out, I could expose everything. But if he caught me, I'd become just another missing face in a forgotten video. And somewhere, someone else would get a suggested clip on their phone. And they'd be next. I kept running, heart pounding, as the man's distorted face twisted into a grotesque grin behind me. His presence felt like a shadow clinging to my back. I tripped over a rock and crashed to the ground. For a moment, I thought it was over. But something deep inside surged up an instinct to survive. I forced myself up and sprinted forward without looking back. I made it home. My body trembled, my breath shaky, but I was alive. I couldn't waste time. Whatever was inside the memory cards needed to be seen. People had to know that this place was no game, no haunted house. It was a nightmare dressed up as an entertainment. I uploaded everything I had. Because if fear is contagious, then maybe truth is too. And maybe, just maybe, I could stop the next person from walking into that horror, all because of a trending video. A woman stumbled out of the haunted house, blood smeared across her shirt, eyes wide with terror. "There's no way out," she gasped, trembling. 3 hours in there? It was hell. Before anyone could stop her, she collapsed onto the pavement, leaving the crowd frozen in horror and confusion. 5 friends stood in front of a newly famous haunted house, attraction on the outskirts of town, drawn in by its chilling slogan. Feels real more than real. At the entrance, each of them was handed a sleek black wristband with a glowing red light. The rule was simple. Do not remove it until the experience ends. Everyone laughed nervously, but seemed excited, except Erin. She hesitated, casting uneasy glances at the towering building wrapped in shadows and fog. "Are we sure about this?" she asked, gripping the band in her hand. "Come on, Erin. Live a little." One of her friends grinned. "It's just a game." With a reluctant smile, Erin slipped on the wristband. The red light blinked once, then glowed steadily. A gate creaked open ahead of them. They stepped inside, unaware that this was not going to be just another Halloween thrill. From the moment they stepped inside, everything felt disturbingly real, too real. The blood looked fresh, The screams were spine-chilling, and the actors behaved less like performers and more like people who had truly lost their minds. Erin and her 4 friends were initially thrilled, laughing and flinching as grotesque NPCs jumped out of shadows, dragged chains, and whispered terrifying lines in their ears. It was all meant to be immersive, and it worked almost too well. Each section of the haunted house was a new nightmare. And after every zone, one friend was taken away by masked staff, supposedly part of the game. It was all fun until Erin realized something unsettling. She was the only one not being pulled aside. With growing unease, she stayed put in a dim hallway, deciding to wait for the others to emerge. Minutes passed, then hours. The thrill turned to dread. No one came back. The house, once buzzing with screams and ambient horror, now felt too quiet. Erin's heart pounded. She looked down at the wristband still blinking on her arm and suddenly wondered, was this still a game? Panic creeping in, Erin decided to search for her friends. She retraced her steps through the haunted attraction, calling out their names. But each door she reached was locked, sealed shut with no sign of how to open it. The eerie silence was suffocating. Gone were the artificial screams and background effects. It was just her in the dark. After what felt like hours wandering the maze-like halls, Erin stumbled upon a small room labeled Control. Inside was a wall full of monitors, her breath caught in her throat. On the screens, she saw her friends, each trapped alone in separate rooms. They were no longer laughing or playing along. They were crying, pounding on walls, shouting for help. Blood was smeared across their clothes and faces, some of it fresh. Erin watched in horror as the same terrifying NPCs that had seemed like part of the fun earlier now stalked her friends with unnatural aggression. One of them wore what looked like spiked gloves, clearly not props. The fear on her friends' faces was real. She realized it then. This wasn't an immersive game. It wasn't a haunted house attraction anymore. This was something far more sinister. Erin's hands shook as she backed away from the monitors. Whatever this place was, it had crossed a terrifying line, and she wasn't sure if any of them were going to make it out alive. Erin's breath quickened as she stumbled backward from the control room. The realization was suffocating. This was no immersive game. This was a trap. She bolted for the hallway, but a sudden jolt of electricity surged through her wrist. The bracelet, once just a silly part of the experience, was now a weapon. Every time she tried to move too fast or change direction, it shocked her, sending pain rippling through her body. Her eyes darted to the monitors once more. One screen showed her standing in the very control room she was in now. The camera was hidden, but watching her, tracking her. Was this all part of a sick game designed just for her? Determined, Erin pushed past the panic. She couldn't abandon her friends. She scanned the control panel, trying to override the locks, but nothing worked. Finally, she forced herself to pry open one of the doors, manually screaming in frustration as the bracelet shocked her with every tug. Then, bang! A bloody hand slammed against the glass window beside her. Erin turned and saw one of her friends, barely conscious, eyes wide in terror. The sight shattered what little calm she had left. Suddenly, the hallway plunged into darkness. From somewhere deep in the maze came the chilling sound of metal being dragged across concrete. The echo grew louder and closer. Erin could barely breathe. She turned and saw it. the emergency exit sign glowing faintly at the far end of the corridor. Her heart pounded. She sprinted. Every step sent a new shock from the bracelet, making her legs tremble, but she kept going. The moment she crossed the threshold, the bracelet sparked violently one last time, and everything collapsed. The walls crumbled, the screams faded. The haunted house disintegrated into a pile of rubble and dust, as if it had never existed. Erin lay on the grass outside, trembling, alive. But her friends, were they ever real? Or just victims of something far more terrifying? Erin escaped that night, but her friends never did. No records, no footage, no evidence they had ever entered the haunted house. The amusement park claimed the attraction was shut down for maintenance, and the staff vanished just as quickly as the building itself. Authorities called her story a trauma-induced hallucination, but Erin knew what she saw. She remembered the screams, the blood, the cold eyes of the NPCs that didn't feel human. Since then, she's lived with a quiet terror, haunted by the unknown, by the silence that followed. She keeps checking missing persons boards, scrolling endlessly, hoping for a face she recognizes. But nothing ever comes. And sometimes, when her phone glitches or the lights flicker at night, she feels it again. That cold air from the hallway. The sound of metal dragging, creeping closer. Erin survived, but the nightmare never truly ended.
A haunted house actor is found dead, hanging from a noose in what was meant to be a fake scene. Staff scream. Panic spreads. The police rule it a suicide, but Ken, a new hire, stares at the body and whispers, "Something doesn't add up. What really happened here?" My name is Ken. I'm a freelance actor, the kind who takes whatever gigs pay the bills. When I got offered a job playing an NPC at a haunted house in an amusement park, I didn't think twice. Easy money, I thought. I was assigned to Room 6, a newly opened section where only one actor performs each night. Alex, the manager, showed me around and told me my role was simple. Don't interact. Just stand still. It felt odd why hire an actor just to stand motionless. Wouldn't a mannequin do the job better? But I needed the cash, so I stayed quiet. On my first night, something strange happened. As I stood silently in the dark, I heard a voice, faint, whispering my name. But the corridor was empty. No footsteps, no guests, no one in sight. That was the moment I felt something wasn't right. Something was watching me. After just a few nights on the job, I began to feel something was off. Each time I arrived at the haunted house, a small note would be taped to my locker. Same messy handwriting, same venomous message. You think coming here will get you somewhere? At first, I thought it was a sick prank by some bored actor playing games. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more unsettled I felt. I started paying closer attention to the people around me. The other actors, the staff, something about them shifted. Their smiles felt too forced, their eyes too hollow. I began to see them not as co-workers, but as masks or thin layers, hiding something darker underneath. It felt like I had stepped into a world where everyone was pretending, not just in character, but in life. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone didn't want me here, and they were getting bolder. I came into the haunted house that evening holding the note in my hand, ready to confront anyone. I showed it to every actor and crew member I passed, asking them directly if they had left it. But all I got in return were cold smirks, dismissive scoffs, and eyes filled with disdain. "Who do you think you are?" someone sneered. "Why would we bother?" My confusion only deepened. If no one admitted to writing it, Then who was watching me so closely? Unbeknownst to me, behind the stage curtain, someone was already watching, his gaze fixed on me with a twisted, knowing smile. I went to the locker room and opened my costume cabinet to change. But as I reached inside, my hand came back wet, stained red. My heart pounded. Blood. A bottle had rolled out of the pile of props and tumbled to the ground. I picked it up and was instantly hit with a sharp, metallic stench of blood mixed with something rotten. It wasn't soda anymore. It was thick, dark, and wrong. On the cap was a familiar gold star. I froze. The first day I arrived, Alex, the manager, showing me around the haunted house. He'd casually taken a sip from a soda bottle with that same gold star cap, smiling as he introduced me to room 6. My body went cold. That bottle wasn't supposed to be here. Why was it in my locker? Why was it filled with blood? I backed away slowly, a chill crawling down my spine. Something about Alex, something about this place, felt off. And I had the sinking feeling that whatever this was, it wasn't just an act anymore. I heard footsteps, light but deliberate. I turned around. Alex was standing there, unmasked and unpainted, no longer hiding behind any costume. A calm, bone-chilling smile spread across his face. "So, you figured it out," he said softly. I stared at him. "Why?" I asked. "I just wanted a normal job like anyone else. Why are you targeting me?" His smile deepened, warped into something terrifying. Then he said something that made my blood freeze. "I like you." I couldn't believe it. A man, admitting he had feelings for me. But this wasn't affection, it was obsession. And his way of showing it? Psychological torment, stalking, threats, mind games. I bolted. He chased after me. "I don't want to hurt you, just don't run," he panted behind me. But I ran harder. I burst into the prop room, slammed the door shut, and locked it. Inside, it was pitch black. I tried to calm my breath. That's when I spotted a hidden panel in the wall, an old musician's door that led straight out to the open-air stage. While Alex struggled with the lock outside, I grabbed a microphone from the shelf and switched it on. The door burst open. He entered slowly, speaking in that same sickeningly sweet tone. "I can show you things no one else can. Open your mind. Come with me into the other world." As he moved toward me, I slowly backed up, closer to the hidden door. Then I threw it open, and in front of us was the crowd, live audience members, dozens of them, watching. Alex froze, eyes wide in horror. Someone screamed. The audience began shouting, throwing trash, yelling in disgust. He roared in fury, exposed for what he really was, not a guide to the other world, but a predator hiding in plain sight. I was commended by the management team for my bravery. It turned out that Alex had harassed and threatened many male performers in the haunted house, but no one dared to speak up. People believed he had connections to something darker, something supernatural, and feared the consequences of crossing him. I felt a mix of relief and unease. I had escaped, but the realization lingered. How many others had suffered in silence? How long had this gone unnoticed under the guise of performance? As I stepped away from the haunted house, I exhaled deeply, knowing this chapter was over, but also painfully aware that the world is still full of twisted minds hiding behind masks, power, and illusions. Evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it calls you colleague. And sometimes it waits behind the curtain, just out of sight.
I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I've worked around heavy machinery, scaled rock faces alone, and camped in the middle of nowhere more times than I can count. But there's something about what happened last November that's never left me. I haven't gone climbing solo since. I used to think I knew the mountains, understood them even, that they were wild but indifferent. Now I'm not so sure. Something changed that day, something I still can't explain. I wasn't injured, I didn't fall, but part of me didn't come back down from that cliff. And I think it's still waiting. I'd been planning a solo climb for weeks. Work had been brutal, tight deadlines, late nights, and I needed to disconnect. No cell service, no emails, just rock, sky, and the quiet hum of my own breathing. I chose a lesser-known ridge along the Sawatch Range in Colorado near Mount Oxford. The route wasn't marked officially, but I'd studied satellite images and plotted a line up a sheer rock face that looked doable. Remote, technical, peaceful, just what I needed. The weather was crisp and dry, perfect climbing conditions. I left my truck before sunrise, gear strapped tight, headlamp cutting through the dark forest. After an hour of hiking, I reached the base of the climb and began ascending. The rock was solid, the air thin and sharp. I clipped in carefully, anchoring every few meters. I was methodical, like always. About halfway up, I noticed something odd. A rusted carabiner embedded in a crack, with an old length of frayed cord still attached. It wasn't just old, it looked forgotten and stained. At first, I thought it was rust, but it wasn't the right color. It was dark, dry, like old blood. I stared at it for a while, trying to shake a sudden creeping unease. I kept climbing, trying to shake the feeling that had settled in my gut. Maybe someone had gotten hurt here before, left the gear behind. Accidents happen. But the higher I went, the quieter everything became. No birds, no wind, just the soft clink of metal against rock and my own breathing, louder than usual in my ears. Then I reached a narrow ledge, just wide enough to stand. I pulled myself up and froze. Lying 10 feet ahead of me was a man. At least, I think it was a man. He was sprawled flat on his back in a faded red climbing jacket. His arms were at his sides, legs splayed. He wasn't moving. I called out. No response. I inched closer, heart hammering. That's when I saw his face, or rather, the absence of one. Where eyes, a nose, a mouth should have been, there was nothing. Just skin. Smooth, pale, stretched tight like wax over a mannequin's head. No signs of trauma, no decay, just wrong. I stumbled back, gripping the rock for balance. A gust of wind hit my back, sudden and cold, and when I looked again, the faceless man had turned his head towards me. I don't know how long I stood there, staring. The air felt thinner than it should have been. I wasn't sure if I was breathing or just shaking. Every instinct screamed at me to get down. I've dealt with injuries, bad weather, and even a black bear once, but nothing ever made me feel the way that thing did. That absence of a face. It was like nature had decided to erase a person, clean, intentional, unnatural. I turned and began rappelling down. Hands trembling, fumbling with my gear, I started descending faster than I should have. Each time I glanced up, I expected to see the body still lying there. But on the third glance, it was gone. Not fallen, gone. I froze in my harness mid-air, hanging 100 feet off the ground, suspended in silence. That's when I heard it. The rope above me tugged. A gentle, deliberate pull. Not wind, not tension. I shouted, "Hello?" hoping stupidly it might be another climber. Silence. Then, creak. Another pull. Closer this time. Whatever was above me was moving down the rope. My rope. I panicked. I started descending recklessly too fast. My glove burned from friction. The wind picked up. I heard faint scraping, like fingers dragging across stone. My body swung as I dropped past jagged rock, heart thudding so hard I thought it might explode. I couldn't see it, but I knew something was on the rope behind me. And it wasn't climbing. It was crawling. By the time my feet hit the base of the cliff, I was a wreck. My legs buckled and I collapsed to my knees, panting, heart beating like a war drum in my chest. I looked up, nothing on the face of the mountain. No figure, no movement, just still rock and sky. But the rope was still swaying gently, like something had let go seconds before. I didn't wait. I unhooked, shoved my gear into my pack and sprinted down the trail. My boots slipped on loose gravel, branches whipped across my arms, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be away. I didn't stop to catch my breath. I didn't look behind me. The forest seemed quieter than before, too quiet, like the trees were listening. When I finally reached the parking area, my truck was the only vehicle there. Of course it was. I threw everything in the back, peeled out of the lot, and didn't stop driving until I hit cell service again. I didn't call anyone. I didn't report anything. I didn't even tell my closest friends. What was I supposed to say? But the worst part didn't happen on the mountain. It happened 3 days later. I was reorganizing my climbing gear in the garage, trying to convince myself I'd imagined everything. That's when I found it, a carabiner I didn't recognize, at the bottom of my pack. Old, rusted, with a faint reddish-brown smear across the latch. I hadn't taken anything with me. I know I hadn't. And yet there it was, the exact one I saw jammed into the rock that day, as if someone or something had given it back, or worse, followed me home. I haven't gone climbing since. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat, thinking I'm still hanging from that cliff, the rope tightening behind me. Other nights I dream I'm back on that ledge, and the faceless man is standing now, arms outstretched, waiting for me to come closer. I've tried convincing myself it was altitude sickness, stress, a waking nightmare. But every time I look at that rusted carabiner sitting in a sealed box in my closet, I know I didn't imagine it. Whatever I saw up there, it wasn't meant to be found. So if you're planning to climb solo, especially in places no one's touched in years, don't. Stick to the roots. Bring a partner. Leave a trace. Because sometimes the mountain doesn't want you there, and sometimes something else is already waiting for you, and it never, ever climbs alone. Most people think the scariest part of mountain climbing is the height, or maybe the cold or falling rocks, but they're wrong. The scariest thing is the silence. Because when you hear something in a place that should be completely still, you start to realize you're not alone. Last fall, I went climbing with 2 close friends through a remote canyon in the Wind River Range. It was supposed to be our last trip before winter. Peaceful, isolated, safe. We thought we were the only ones out there, until we heard a voice call out from the canyon. A voice that wasn't ours. It was late October when we decided to go. Me, Eric, and Leah. The weather had already started to turn, but there was still a narrow window before the snow made climbing too dangerous. Eric had found a lesser-known trail through the Wind River Range in Wyoming. Rugged, remote, and barely touched by other climbers. It sounded perfect. We were all experienced, plenty of multi-day hikes and alpine climbs between us. We packed light but smart, ropes, helmets, thermal layers, headlamps, a satellite phone in case things went sideways. It was supposed to be one of those trips where the challenge made the view that much more rewarding. And for the first day or so, it was exactly that. The route took us through a deep canyon carved by glacier runoff, narrow, steep, and echoing with every word we spoke. At one point, we took turns shouting our names into the canyon, laughing as the echoes bounced back. It was stupid, childish fun, the kind you only really allow yourself when you're off-grid and completely alone. Or so we thought. It wasn't until we heard the voice that wasn't any of ours, calling my name, that we realized we weren't as alone as we believed. At first, we thought it was just the echo playing tricks on us. Sound does weird things in places like that, bouncing off jagged walls, twisting and warping. But then it called out again, and this time there was no mistaking it. The voice was deeper, slower, almost metallic. It dragged out my name, Tyler, in a way that didn't sound like any of us, and certainly not like an echo. We all went quiet. I looked at Eric and Leah, expecting one of them to laugh or admit to the prank. Neither did. Eric's face had gone pale. Leah shook her head slowly. Then the voice spoke again, but this time it said Eric's name, and then Leah's. Exactly once. Each name slow and deliberate, always in the same strange, unnatural tone. It wasn't coming from a specific direction. It felt like it was coming from inside the canyon itself, like the rocks were whispering back to us. We didn't call out anymore. We just stood there, listening, waiting for it to happen again. But it didn't. We chalked it up to the wind, or maybe a fluke in the echo pattern. Still, something in our group dynamic shifted after that. The laughter didn't come back. By late afternoon, the weather started to shift, wind picking up, the temperature dropping fast. The canyon narrowed into a series of tight passes, and the rock got slick with frost. We pushed forward, hoping to make it to a flat clearing Eric had marked on the map, but somewhere along the way, we lost track of each other. It happened quickly. Leah went ahead to scout a steep slope. Eric lingered behind, adjusting his gear, and I was somewhere in the middle. The fog rolled in fast, swallowing the canyon walls. I shouted their names, no response, just echoes and wind. I waited at a junction, hoping they'd circle back. Instead, I heard footsteps behind me, soft, steady crunches on the gravel. I turned, expecting to see Eric, but no one was there, just fog and rock. I kept moving, heart pounding, flashlight cutting through the gloom. Eventually, I found a narrow crevice beneath an overhang, just big enough to crawl into and wait out the cold. I settled inside, hugging my knees, trying to calm myself. That's when I heard it again. Laughter, not loud, not frantic, just a quiet, rhythmic chuckle, like someone trying not to laugh too hard. It came from behind the wall of rock, too close, too real. I held my breath, afraid to move, afraid to blink. Then came the whisper, Tyler. This time I didn't try to rationalize it. There was someone or something out there with me, and it knew my name. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I swore I could hear breathing. Slow, shallow, and too close. Once, I thought I saw a hand press lightly against the rock from the outside, fingers dragging downward before vanishing into the shadows. But I stayed put. I didn't have the courage to step out into that fog. By morning, the wind had died down and the fog began to thin. I climbed out of the crevice, exhausted and paranoid but alive. After some wandering and shouting, I finally spotted Eric waving at me from across a ridge. Relief hit me so hard I almost cried. Leah was with him, but she looked different, pale, distant. She said she'd slept through the night and didn't remember hearing anything unusual. Eric hadn't seen or heard the voice either, just thought we got separated in the fog. We chalked it up to bad luck and worse weather. It wasn't until we got home that the final piece dropped. Eric had been recording most of the trip with his GoPro. While reviewing the footage, he paused at a clip near the end, one he didn't remember taking. In the video, I'm standing alone in the canyon, staring directly at the camera, expressionless, silent. And behind me, half hidden in the rocks, is a shape. Tall, thin, its outline barely visible. The timestamp on the clip, 3:17 a.m. That's the exact time I was huddled inside the crevice, paralyzed with fear. I swear I never left that space. I swear I never looked into that camera. But there I was, recorded, staring as if I'd become something else. Or worse, something else had worn my skin. I've gone climbing since then, but never alone, and never anywhere near that canyon. Sometimes I wonder if we really made it out, or if part of me is still there, staring into that camera, waiting. I deleted the video, or at least I tried to. But Eric swears it shows up again every time he reformats the SD card. Same file, same timestamp, same blank stare. Leah doesn't talk about the trip anymore. I don't blame her. So here's my advice. If you ever find yourself in a remote canyon and you hear a voice calling your name in a place where no one should be, don't answer. Don't call back. Don't acknowledge it. Some echoes don't come from your voice. Some things in those mountains aren't meant to be found. And if you hear a third voice that doesn't belong to anyone in your group, leave immediately. I've climbed dozens of mountains alone, slept under the stars, faced blizzards, even had a close call with a black bear once. But none of that ever scared me like this did. What happened in Montana last winter wasn't an injury, a storm, or even a fall. It was something else. Something I still don't have a name for. I came back with all my gear, no broken bones, no frostbite. But when I looked through my photos later, I realized I hadn't been alone up there. And whatever was watching me, it made sure to show up in every single shot. It was early December when I drove out to Montana, hoping to catch one last solo climb before the heavy snow buried the range for the season. I'm a nature photographer by trade, mostly freelance, and I like working alone. There's a kind of quiet clarity I get out there that I don't find anywhere else. No emails, no noise, just me, my camera, and the mountains. I'd picked out an unnamed peak on the edge of the Absaroka Range. It wasn't officially mapped as a climbing route, which made it even more appealing. No tourists, no markers, just pure wilderness. I planned for a 2-day hike, ascend, camp near the summit, then head back down at sunrise. The weather was cold but clear, and the climb itself started off smooth. I took photos every hour or so, sunlight on the ice, cloud shadows rolling across ridges. Everything felt calm. About 3 hours in, I came across something strange. A set of footprints in the snow. Human footprints. Deep, deliberate. They were leading away from where I was heading, starting in the middle of an untouched slope, with no trail behind them. No one should have been up there, and yet, someone clearly was. I followed the prints for a few minutes, hoping maybe I'd find another hiker, someone I could at least exchange a nod with before continuing on. But the more I looked, the more they didn't make sense. The tracks didn't come from anywhere. They began mid-slope, where the snow was untouched in every direction. No entrance, no descent trail, just started. Then I saw him, a figure maybe 200 feet above me, standing perfectly still on the ridge. He was dressed in black, jacket, pants, maybe even gloves. No gear, no pack, no visible face. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even shift his weight. I lifted my camera to take a shot. It only took a few seconds, but by the time I lowered it, he was gone. No movement, no sound, no trace. I scanned the ridge. Nothing. A strange chill ran through me, and it wasn't from the wind. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe a shadow or a tree stump caught my eye. But deep down, I knew I'd seen someone. Someone standing where no one should have been able to get to. I should have turned back then, but I didn't. I kept climbing. The higher I climbed, the more uneasy I felt. The silence had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was expectant, like the mountain was holding its breath. I reached a flat outcropping just before the final ascent and decided to rest. I took a few wide shots of the ridgeline. When I zoomed in to review them on my camera screen, my stomach twisted. In one photo, barely visible between two jagged stones, was him. Same black clothing, same motionless posture, just standing there. But what made my skin crawl was the angle. I had taken the photo facing south, the opposite direction of where I'd seen him earlier. I stood up, scanned the horizon. No one, just cold air and distant peaks. I pressed on, half out of denial, half out of stubbornness. I crested a slope and looked up at a nearby summit, and there he was again, standing higher than me in the same exact stance. There was no way he could have gotten there. Not unless he was flying. I called out, "Hey!" Nothing. I waved. No response. I took another photo, looked down for just a second, and when I looked back, the summit was empty. I felt like I was being watched, constantly. No matter where I turned, I expected to see that figure just above me. Somehow always one step ahead, always higher. I wasn't just climbing a mountain anymore, I was climbing toward him. I decided to turn back. I'd gone far enough, and whatever was happening, it wasn't natural. I didn't want to camp up there anymore. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the snow. As I began my descent, I glanced behind me. He was still there, now much closer, maybe 50 feet above, standing at the edge of a narrow ridge, his silhouette stark against the sky. Still no face, still no movement, just watching. I moved faster, nearly slipping on the icy slope. Every few minutes I checked over my shoulder. He never followed, but he never disappeared again either. He was always just there, staring. When I finally reached the base camp clearing, I forced myself to take one last photo before leaving, just to prove to myself he wasn't real. I aimed the lens at the upper ridge. Click. Nothing. I hiked down in silence, head spinning. No more figure, no more footsteps, just cold air and the crunch of my boots. Back home, I plugged in my camera and uploaded the files. Every landscape shot had him in it, sometimes in the corner, sometimes barely visible between trees or rocks. Once, he was reflected in a frozen lake, closer than I remembered being. But the final photo, the one I took before leaving, he wasn't on the ridge, he was in the foreground, closer than ever, facing the camera. No face, no features, just a black void where a head should be, and somehow, a second shadow behind me. I was alone when I took that photo. I know I was. I haven't gone climbing alone since. I still take photos, but never in remote places. Never without people around. Sometimes, late at night, I go through the old files again, trying to convince myself I imagined it. But he's still there, in every shot. Always higher, always watching. I've tried deleting the photos, they come back. I've tried destroying the SD card, didn't work. And the worst part, I've started seeing him in pictures I took before that trip. Old hikes, old climbs. He's faint, almost invisible. But once you know where to look, he's there. So here's my advice. If you're out in the wild and you see someone standing where no one should be, don't take a picture. Don't acknowledge them. Don't climb higher just to get a better look. Because some things on the mountain didn't hike up there. They're already waiting at the top.